Here we are.
Hey, hey,
Hey, hey. Nice to speak to you, Luke. We've spoken
yeah,
quite a lot over the years since the convid started. Um, and we've both been down different rabbit holes with different processes, etc. So we thought we'd just get together, have a bit of a yarn. We have a lot of living men and women in both our communities, and some of them cross-pollinate. And so we're just going to have a chat about a few things.
yeah. Looking forward to it, mate. It's good to be on here and good to connect, and looking forward to seeing wherever the conversation flows. So it's obviously an interesting state of the world at the moment, and lots of distraction and lots of things pulling people in a different direction. So there's never a better time to be able to come together and chat, and I guess just bring different perspectives and different wisdom. Which is I'm a massive believer in. I'm a massive believer that we're all just here to have experiences and then pass that on to the collective. I can't live your life. Like you've said, we've crossed paths and gone down our own different pathways many a times and then crossed back over. And I think that's what it's all about. It's this beautiful opportunity for us to share from that lived experience and from that wisdom piece. Like anyone can read a book and get knowledge, but the embodiment and the lived experience comes through the application and the action and that embodiment in the 3D world. And that's something that I really like to embody and like to live by. And even to the point of, if you flip the word devil, you get lived, and if you flip the word live, you get evil. And so for me, it's that unlived that takes us down that sort of, the darker path or the non-truthful path or the illusionary path, and the
Mhm.
lived experience that allows us to have that wisdom and then share that with the collective, because I can't live your life, but I can learn a hell of a lot from that wisdom and what you share and what you bring, and vice versa. And if we're honest and transparent and authentic in that, then that's how we can serve the collective, in my opinion. So, yeah, looking forward to seeing where the conversation flows and just take it where it
Absolutely.
comes. And
And there's more than one way to skin a cat as well. What suits me might not suit you and vice versa. But also, when you're talking about the acronyms of words and swapping the words around, I also believe in duality. Something can be one thing and something else at the exact same time. And I think that's where we come into also looking at jurisdictions. So we're operating in more than one jurisdiction, and most of us, the masses, just don't realize that. They don't realize that we're actually more than one, that we are a name on a piece of paper or a contract, like a birth certificate, and that in that contract, that the system makes profit on that contract. And it's a domino effect. The first contract leads on to the next contract, for example, a tax file number, which then could lead on to a marriage certificate, which then could lead on to a divorce certificate or becoming a company director or having your name on a land title. They're all contracts with the system where we're the debtor. It's like a dead entity, a name on a piece of paper. And most don't even know that they're that. They just know that they're programmed and those things are to live their life. Whereas there's actually a whole other side to us, which is the real side to us, that I'll just speak for myself. I am a living, breathing, I am alive. I am a living, tangible woman with my life force energy. That's my energy. I'm the creditor. Oh, I should be the creditor of that energy. No one else should really profit from the sweat equity of that. All right. And that's in this other jurisdiction that most of the masses aren't even aware of. I do think in the last half a decade of COVID, etc., more of the masses are becoming aware, which I think is so vital. I don't think the game is up though. I think there's so many though who still believe that the government's there to serve them and that they're there to be protected and to feel safe. And I think they've also the system or GovCorp or even above GovCorp, there's probably 13 puppeteers on the whole planet. I think what they realize to take advantage of is the innate human instincts to be comfortable. We humans like to be cozy, comfortable. They like to feel safe within their confines. They don't want to reach too far because they're quite lazy. And that means that really, as long as they're comfortable and they can just put one foot in front of the other and everything's about me, 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 and what I can get and what's going to serve me, and also instant gratification. and the least point of resistance, right? The system is relying on those innate human nature things. And it's my experience that the living men and women that I see that are willing to step outside the box, that are willing to be successful in more ways than just tangible material worth, and that living a life with purpose and mission legacy actually creates a lot of abundance. They are willing to put themselves in discomfort. Now, I think the convert situation was that they relied on the fact that most humans don't like to feel discomfort. So they were willing just to swap something, even if they didn't sit well with them, to get to the other side. But now, 5 years later, we're now about the digital ID situation. Now, a quandary about that is I find that good men and women discover there's a problem after the horse is bolted, right? So this issue with the digital ID, well, the legislation's already passed, right? We've got the Digital ID Act in 2024. So I was talking about this the other day. I feel like we need a little committee of good men and women who are constantly watching when they're sitting in Parliament. We need to be 2 steps ahead of what they're about to do in Parliament to know what bills are going to be passed months ahead of time. But we would need a committee doing that 24/7. That is the only way to get this before the horse is bolted. So with digital ID, for example, the horse is already bolted, that digital ID act is in place. So I'm all about, Luke, okay, look, I don't want to have a fight mentality. I don't want to die of a heart attack or stroke. I really would like ease, grace, and flow. I'm not about FU. I'm not about fight, but I'm also not about how to get out of something, because the buck stops with me. I have full responsibility. So then I want to focus on what I can do, not what I can't do. So sometimes we have to man ourselves with the greatest weapon we have, and that is a critical mind, critical thinking. And you know what? If we're stuck with this legislation, let's know it in detail, because another thing they're betting on, we don't read the terms and conditions. And if that's what legislation is, let's read the terms and conditions. So if we really want to comprehend what we can and cannot do with this digital ID, look at the legislation. I did do an education about this a few weeks back. It's on my YouTube channel. And some may say, well, this is you just accepting the digital ID or agreeing with it or copying out. No, it isn't. This is about, okay, it's in place. Let's focus on what we can do. And let's man the everyday man and woman in layman's terms, how they can address this. If you go to the MyGov ID, the MyGov website, you want to go have a look at this is for everyday men and women. You want to go have a look at your Centrelink or your Medicare or whatever it is. Now, you used to be able to just put in your customer reference number and a password, but now the first choice is the digital ID. And if you don't have one, click this link. We made it easy for you. You can now get your digital ID. Humans, again, are lazy or they're not thinking. Scroll a bit further and you can still log in the old way. Now, at some point, they're going to take that old way option away. Okay. So at the top, there's just going to be the digital ID. However, under their own legislation, they must give an alternative. They must. It's in their legislation, which is great. So in that education that you can get through Warrior at Law, we've created a little template that keep in your wallet, keep in your handbag, whether you need to type it in a letter, write it in an email, or you might have a face-to-face interaction with a public officer. You need to educate them on their legislation and what they need to do. You've probably heard this before, Luke. Zev at Warrior at Law, he always says, just because, if you walk into his home, he may offer you tea and coffee. Now, that's the illusion of choice. It gives us the sense of freedom. We think, oh, we have a sense of choice, freedom. There's tea or coffee. However, he always says, however, what I'm not telling you is there's also top shelf whiskey, filtered water, orange juice on the shelf behind. That's also available. You just didn't know the right questions to ask to get the right answers. So they give us the illusion of freedom, but there's not a lot of freedom. They're actually binding us even more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. It's like just a channeling, right? They're just talk about language again. It's like the banks of the currency or the banks of the system are like steering the direction and the flow of that energy. I love what you said earlier around that realization that your life force and your energy is the greatest commodity and the greatest currency on the planet.
That's what actually makes the financial markets work.
Absolutely. It makes the whole world work. It's the one thing that if you took it away tomorrow, everything that we know it as it exists would cease. Yeah? Whereas if we took away money, if we took away other things, like we'd still, sure, there'd be some chaos, there'd probably be a lot of destruction, but humanity would continue to persevere and survive. But if we took away life force, that's it. It's kaput. And when you realize that, it's so empowering because you sort of realize that from a life force and an energy point of view, like that is yours.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
No one that can take from that. You know, if we get really into the nitty gritty, it becomes sort of like attempted murder to be able to take that life force from. It's like the diminishment of one's life. So when you understand that and you're empowered in that and you can stand in that, then you can sort of relate, I think, to a lot of these legislations and acts in a slightly different lens and come from that place of response rather than reaction.
And everything's just an offer.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Everything's an offer. And the thing is, we've been programmed to react and to have a quick response under the place of fear or we'll get in trouble. I always say to myself, when I've been given an offer and the offer's in front of me and it's on a Friday, will I die if I don't send a response right now? Can it wait till Monday? Can I let the layers land? Can I have a real self-determined, researched response instead of being reactive? Because, you know, when, your kids say, we've got no food in the house, there's nothing there, and they quickly run into the pantry and they run out again. If you stand at the pantry long enough, you're going to find something to eat. So the same thing with this. We're programmed to have a reactive knee-jerk decision. I always say, whether it's in your personal life with relationships or family members, whether it's professional, career, whether it's in whatever structure that you're setting up to run projects or business, whatever the decision, whatever the situation is, we're at a fork in the road. There's going to be option A or option B. The most important thing is our breath, breathing, and then remembering who we are. Humans have been here on certain lands for over 70,000 years, which tells me something. We've been able to survive much longer than the current modern financial system, for example, right? The last 200 years. So let's give ourselves a bit more credit. Breathe and then stop and think, right, with whatever question or offer is coming at me, whatever decision I make right now, whether it's option A or option B, what has been the paper trail or the breadcrumbs that lead me to this point right now? Has it been positive or detrimental? What do I need to look out for? What do I need to clean up? And then think, well, whatever option I make, option A or option B, what is going to be the domino effect or the ripple effect or the butterfly effect of my decision, and whether that will be positive or detrimental. And then just let the layers land for a couple of days. And then I always say, trust your gut. Now, sometimes we've been led to believe that that butterfly effect could be actually fear, or that fear could actually be the butterfly effect. Again, you need to sit with that. Be present. Remember who you are. Then once you've considered all things, now there's nothing wrong with getting education. There's nothing wrong with getting mentorship. That's not outsourcing our decisions. That's actually being quite wise. There's a difference between outsourcing all our decisions, because again, in that public statutory system, we outsource to the doctor specialist, we outsource to the accountant, the solicitor. We take all these very important life decisions out of our own hands because we don't want the responsibility. Whereas I think the greatest freedom is actually saying the buck stops with me. I'm going to vibrate at the most high vibrational level of self-responsibility. And that may cause a little bit of discomfort sometimes, but I really believe growth and healing comes in discomfort. then we make the decision.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And it's been so important in my journey as well. Like, what's the actual vision I'm trying to create? Like when those moments come of like, where am I going? What's the most obvious step in alignment with that? You know, because we always have that beautiful thing about being human is that free will of choice. I can either step in alignment with that vision and what I know is true, or what I feel is true, or I can step away from it. And in that moment, I accept whatever comes from that decision. You know? And sometimes it is discomfort. Sometimes there is a little bit of challenge in that, but it's like, okay, cool. Like, again, check in when that challenge comes back. It's like, what's the choice? What's the highest good? What if I'm serving my highest self? I'm already living in that space.
Luke, what do you feel about intention? Because intention is at the root of this. We need to be honest with ourselves. What is our true intention behind this?
Yeah, absolutely. Am I running from something, or am I owning something? Am I taking responsibility for something? Even if we look at the word intention, right? Like, and we can look at it in two ways. We have the intention of like having a cup of cacao, for example. I would love to feel more present, or I would love to do this with my energetical state. But if we separate that word of tension into intention from a creative orientation, if we look at like the hermetic principles or alchemy, turning lead into gold, that's that alchemic principle of tension from a creative point of view. So we actually want to be in tension, mirroring what you said around resistance. Like resistance, that if we look at it from a physics perspective, again, we're energy in my belief. We're just conduits of energy. We're just atoms that have come together. So if we look at it from that physics perspective, for every action, there's an equal and opposite level of reaction. So for every level of expansion, you're going to be met with a level of resistance. And when you understand that, then all of a sudden your mindset toward that becomes, cool, I'm going to lean in to this and I'm going to step into the tension. So if we look at, for me, I like to define like the difference between stress and tension as stress being a fear response from not knowing where I'm going, from outsourcing or whatever that might be, of not having a clear pathway, versus tension just being the gap between my current reality, where I am right now, and where I would love to be. And so I get myself into tension, which then is that intention of, okay, I'm currently here, but I would love to be here. It's so important from a creative orientation point of view to be able to understand that difference. Then in that moment, go, okay, breathe, like you said, observe the situation, like let go of our attachment to who we think we have to be or who we think we are, and that identity piece, which is often our biggest limitation to our growth. And then just observe the truth of the matter in that lens of the highest good. Have a look at the vision. Okay, do I have a vision for how I would love for this to play out or not? If not, maybe I should have a think about what I would love, because then I'm going to be able to just take an obvious step towards that. And so I can operate from a place of response or ownership or a higher frequency rather than a fear response or like a control response or whatever that might, however that might manifest for each and every one of us will be a little bit different based on the, you know, whatever we're mirroring back to ourselves to transcend essentially. And so that's how it's intention so important for us. I love to think of, you know, just bringing simplistic intentionality into life. Again, that lens of your time, your energy, your life force, your most important asset. So how do you maximize the return of investment you're going to get? And also from a creative point of view, of that focus creates your reality. Where do I put my energy? And is that aligned with the inputs that I would love to receive? Because that inputs equal that outputs. So if I'm putting out into the world this fear response and this frantic energy, this chaos, I'm going to bring that back into my life.
Of course, you're going to pull it in.
Exactly. So if I'm putting out calm, response, alignment, highest truth, that's what my reality will start to shape it towards. And that's what I think we're seeing at the moment. And what I can feel at the moment is like this divergence happening of, yeah, there'll be a world where people just sign up the digital ID and they fall into CBDCs and central currencies and digital programming and all those things. And that'll happen over there. But there'll be this other world over there. And there'll be a whole other space that people are operating in quite happily, quite freely, and understand who they are. And again, I agree with you. Like, we don't want to bring that fight energy to it. It's not about saying F you to anything or F you to the system. It's like, if we take that physics lens again, like the system of control of what we would look at, that needs an opposing force. It's just physics. It
Absolutely.
Can't survive in a vacuum or in isolation. So if we just step out of that, step above it, rise above it,
side over here,
go in parallel, parallel, system will naturally eat itself alive, which is what I think we're seeing at the moment. We're
Yeah.
seeing like a real, like, I just step back and see the way things are playing out. We're seeing a speeding up with like an urgency.
Mm.
I think there's an urgency on both sides. I feel from a like conscious of space that there's an urgency within the collective to let go and to really like shift and work through anything that's holding back from a higher frequency. And there's also this calling for systems that align with like exponential expansion and like going to higher levels really, really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also this urgency from the other side of like control and negating and cracks.
And
Yeah.
some are feeling, I know some of us who are in this space and who are looking for alternatives are feeling the walls closing in a little bit. Now, so for those who like practical meat and potato remedy methods, what can one do if they're starting to feel the walls closing in and they do want to step aside and find some things that are less constricting? What do you think the first step should be, and what are some pathways that we can now start to look at to really unbind ourselves from that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the first thing is breathe. If you don't know that it's not really closing in, it's just
Back
like
to the breath.
yeah, come back to the breath. And I'm a massive believer in like we don't need those external tools like to be able to create a response within the body. We have that tool. The breath is like the greatest tool that we have. You know, you can use plant medicines and those things to get more expansiveness if you want to, but you can still utilize the breath to get into those spaces. So first and foremost is breathe, and then to ask the right questions and find support, find community. Because like you said earlier, like we're like from a mammalistic perspective, we're kind of herd. We're animals, we're mammals. So we have this like herd dynamic that plays out where, and I'm sure many of the listeners will probably have experienced this, where if you're the first one in your group to go down a spiritual development pathway or a personal development pathway, and you start to put boundaries in your relationships, you get that like herd mentality of, oh, are you okay? Something's changed. What's wrong with you? I don't like this. What's going on? You know, and that's the herd dynamic playing out because, again, we like that comfort. We don't like change. We like that security, that stability. And we've been conditioned to do that and outsource that. And so when we see that, one of the most important things that we can do is to find community, is to find people that are aligned or that resonate with us to be able to support us through and to be able to ask those questions, to be able to see the pathway and the possibilities. And I think that's one thing I love about Warrior Law and the remedies and those aspects is that there are practical tools and solutions for people to be able to follow and be able to go, cool, like now there's the pathway. Now the mind can let go of that survival instinct because there's a pathway, there's a data reference. Oh, someone else has done it. Someone else is surviving, and not just surviving, but thriving over there. Okay, I can too. Because I think that was for me what I saw in Convid was that there was just not many pathways out there for people, or if there just wasn't as much awareness of them. And so for me, it's been like this, okay, how do we bring more awareness to people? How do we plant more seeds out there without trying to play the savior game or save everyone
We can't
game?
rescue everyone. It's everyone's job to look after ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think discernment's going to be one of the biggest like skills over the next couple of years of like, okay, how does this relate to me? How can one thing I just like to give people information and then go, what resonates with you and what resonates with you? That's what's most important. You know, don't trade one dependency of if you're getting all of your information from one media source or the government or being told what to do or scripture or wherever it is for you, where you put your power. Don't then just trade that for someone else. You know, don't create another codependency over here where that's the only person that you listen to.
We don't need to swap one slave master for another.
No, not at all.
I think we need to remember we need to lead ourselves first, teach ourselves to lead ourselves, but then also it's also changing the script of instead of it being about me, when we start to make things about we and the collective, it actually all comes back to us anyway. When we start thinking, instead of thinking, well, what can I get? What can I grab? Instead of thinking, what can I give? How am I of service? What is my purpose, mission, legacy? What is my intention here? That actually will map out the pathway of where you're meant to go anyway, and look, I always joke a little bit about it, but it's so true. I see this duality. There's going to be literally two types of society. I almost call it a bit of a Mad Maxing. I joke and go, my hair's a bit Mad Maxy today, because I really do think that. I really do think, and I don't think it's going to be a war. I think the thing is, these guys are going to try and maintain control and to ostracize, right? That's their way that they control. But here I see ease, grace, and flow. And I'm liking that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And those remedies are out there for people. You know, it's just a matter of asking those questions and coming from that place of response with it and taking ownership. And I'm a massive believer in nature. So for me, like all the frameworks that I use, whether it's in the support that we use or even just for our own personal sense, is like ecosystem is like one of the biggest laws that I see in nature of like giving back more than you receive. And the beautiful way that that plays out is when you do that in connection with your own inherent nature, not only just the nature external to you, but the nature within, then those same areas follow that same principle. And so if you give an alignment from a purpose piece, those spaces that you give an alignment to, they give back more than they receive. So you then receive more than you gave, and then it brings your capacity up. So you're more full, you're more nourished, you're ready to go again from an energetical point of view, and then you give more again, and you receive more, and you give and you receive. And that's that abundance mindset, and that's that ecosystem framework that nature provides us. And if we look at the current financial system for a sense, like it's all from the bottom to the top. It's all take. It's all flow to a narrow point. It never goes back to the original source.
No. Yeah.
And so it's out of alignment with nature. And that's why so many of us feel so disconnected from it, because at our core, it's not a principle or it's not a law of nature that we're supposed to actually operate with. But for many of us, especially with the masses, we then use the different things that has been put in place, like your drugs, your alcohol, your disconnection tools, your sports, to be able to escape that and to justify it and to reason it. And that's one of the big things I like to say to people. If we're creating justification for something or creating reasoning for it, that's the place of shadow. That's the language of shadow. That's not to say you won't be able to create nice things, but it just won't ever be that 100% true.
I also think about asking questions. So the things that you spoke of, I always think if the system or the powers that be are making large profit off whatever it is, take a look underneath that. Is it really then for my highest good or benefit? Right? Big pharma, alcohol, right? Profit margins are massive. So is it really for my highest good? Are they really thinking about me when they're putting those industries in place? Or is it about their greater good, their highest profit? And I think that's where we have the capacity to actually fill the broken bits. Now, the system isn't broken. I believe the system was set up this way. It's meant to be exactly like this. And the system means that there's loads of gaps. So we have the ability to fill those gaps with liquid gold. We just don't have to do it in the way that they deem us to with control. We have the right to self-determination. You know, we have the right to freely associate. They just don't want us to believe we have that right. Now, I'm all about realistic remedy. I'm not about putting red flags on my head. Like I said, I like a life of ease, grace, and flow. So I want to make sure that my life force living energy and my activities in this meat suit, I want to make sure that I'm doing things without having to look over my shoulder or be fearful. I want to live transparently, authentically. So I want to make sure that I am living under frameworks that do exist on this planet, because I can't move to privacy planet. I exist on planet Earth. So if living men and women are a little bit worried about protecting, whether it's their property and they don't want any nefarious party to get to that, if they're worried about, how they interact with the contracts in the system, or how are they going to run things without, allowing the system to take full profit of all their hard work, sweat equity, sorry. There are ways around that. You just want to make sure that you do your due diligence. And it's based under actual international covenants, laws, and treaties that genuinely exist on this planet. But not only that, that have been acknowledged in whatever statutes and legislation that we're standing on, the land that we're standing on. And that's so important. Sometimes using the system against the system, there's nothing wrong with that, but we're just going to do it over here. And I think that's where look, I call it the truth, the sovereign, freedom, private movement. A lot of it came up in the last half a decade. Most men and women in that space and educators have beautiful hearts. They come from a great intention. I do see a lot of misinformation in that space. And I think that comes from a place of fear or conspiracy theory. And I think that's where we need to remember. And just because we see it doesn't make it so. Or just because we see a quote, check it's not being taken out of context, because I do see a lot of good men and women getting in a little bit of hot water just because they've taken one little piece out of context and then they run with it. So I do think it's important to have conversations, to get education. We only know what we know till we know something more. And again, we come back to that point of not being reactive, not coming from a place of fear, and then thinking, you know what? I want to risk mitigate my whole life. I want to reverse engineer things and see all the holes and bung them up. You know, I think that way we can then just move forward, because we know we've done our due diligence for ourselves. We've taken responsibility for ourselves and our family. We've set up more than one structural process. I always believe in layers of protection, right? Because risk mitigating, what if one layer has to pause or falls down? We've got 3 other moats around our castle protecting us. So, you know, and I have the privilege of living and breathing with wonderful living men and women setting up these structures every day. And I always say, you know, life is in 3s. We are made up of a mind, body, and soul. We're also made up of the debtor, dead entity, the creditor, life force, living energy, and also protecting the structures of our life force, living energy. That's a triangle of 3 as well. I call it the remedy trilogy. And if anyone wants to know about that, we'll share about that. So we use our time here. Before we go, I would really love you to share that a lot of the mainstream, I used to call them minions, they're beautiful living men and women. A lot more are becoming aware, and their ears are now closer to the ground than before. They may have got the jab, and then they learnt maybe that wasn't so lawful. And now the digital ID is happening, and they've really woken up and gone, you know what, fool me once, but don't fool me twice. Where do you think we should start if we're in that position of, oh, there's so much information and there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of good-hearted groups? How do I start right now today, Luke?
Cool. Great question. Come back to self first and foremost. Get really clear on your values, what you stand for, what you don't stand for, because that will be your guiding foundation in the steps that you take. That will allow you to have that discernment of, like, this really resonates with me. That person speaking my language, that energy feels right. Doesn't mean you have to be in that space for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
It may just be the stepping stone to that vision. And I think one of the massive things around, we call it an awakening, so to speak, is that rebuilding trust within self and having a community to be able to hold that transmission and that sort of like evolution, so to speak. Because one of the biggest things that happens within an awakening, or in those moments where we realize that maybe the world's not how we quite thought it was when we've been told, is we lose trust in ourselves. We start to question every single decision that we make.
We feel like we've been gaslit. It's like being
exactly, yeah.
a little bit, right?
Yeah. So you've got to rebuild that trust within self. But the smoothest way to do that I've found, the people that I've worked with, is that foundation of self first and foremost. My values, what I stand for, the standards in which I live, where do I want to go? What's the vision? What would I love in 5 years' time? Cool. Where would I love to be? But now I just reverse engineer it. Like you said, I reverse engineer it. Okay, what does that look like in 3 months' time? Okay, how do I take the steps towards that? If we're talking about digital ID, if we're talking about CBDCs, it's like, have a look at my life, have a look at all the different things that I put energy into. What's one of those spaces that I can shift where I actually own the infrastructure, or I'm in control of that, or I'm like just steering it, and I'm responding to the world through it rather than reacting, or someone else that can flip the switch.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I create more autonomy in what I do? What does that look like? Like you say, diversifying across different spaces, so I have different streams of energy coming in. Right. Diversifying across different communities, so I've got different places in which I can go for different levels of support, because that's the thing with the sovereign truth of freedom movement. People start to branch out into so many different things, but they have one real core speciality. And I would love to see more people just going and sticking with that and going, I really am really, really good at this. So
Yes.
I'm going to focus. This is my genius. This is my wisdom. This is my lived experience. I'm
Mhm.
good at this. These people over here are great at that. Because that's the one thing I would love to sort of, in my journey, as I have conversations with people, shift a little bit is like this fragmentation of competition, of like spitting at each other and tearing each other
Whereas,
down. We
you know
see it
what?
in the,
We all have different things to offer. For example, Zev, the founder of Warrior Law, and myself, our area is lawful and legal rights and
yeah,
strategies regarding that. That is our area of genius. We will never call ourselves experts because we're always going to continue learn, but
yeah,
genuinely, that's where we come in. However, if someone wants to know about wealth strategy or they want to have alternative methodologies in other types of currency, or they might want to look at holistic wellness, all the different things. Zev and I, we're about being warriors of law, and that's the opposite of being a solicitor, but looking at our lawful and legal rights and also learning how we can step aside transparently and authentically. That's our area. However, if those some might want to start with, well, what's natural law and who we are? I'm going to recommend someone else. That's their area. Someone might genuinely want to know, well, what are my public tax obligations? And then how can I do wealth strategy with that? That's not my area. I would share that with someone else. And I really agree with you because we all have something to offer. I believe in collaboration, not competition. I think that's
100% agree.
important. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. Because competition's a scarcity thing. It's
Yes.
come from a place of lack. It's like
There's
there's
enough,
8+ billion
there
people
is
in the world.
enough pie. There is
Yeah,
beautiful pie to eat, and
yeah,
we all are deserving of the pie. And if, again, it's intention, I always say, you want to get education and have conversations with many or whatever aligns with you. I actually sometimes say, you might be getting a consult or mentor session with someone. I say, listen to their words, of course, really hear what they're saying, but more importantly, listen to the space between the words. Look between their sentences, look past what they're saying, and really see into them, because trust your own energy and you will feel that back into your own intuition. That's what you need to do. When you want to make decisions, listen between their words, watch their eyes. What's their bravado? What's their energy? And what's their intention with what they're saying? Most times, when someone is lying to you, they are actually telling you the truth. My partner actually shared that wisdom with me this morning. Listen to what they're saying. And if your gut instinct is telling you that something's off, I think they're lying to me, they're actually telling you the truth within the lie.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
Watch their
I think,
demeanor, watch how they come across. It tells you everything.
yeah, absolutely. And I feel like we've been taught to forget that we're speaking energetics first and foremost. We all
Absolutely.
come into the world speaking energy, and we lay our language on top of it. And
Yes.
so
Now,
we're
if,
starting.
if those who want to get in touch, they've resonated with you, Luke, what pathways can living men and women get in touch with you?
Yeah, what's the best way is probably we can put some links down below from the
I
chat. We'll
will.
chuck some links down
I
there.
will do that. And then we can
Yeah,
go from there. I always love what you share, and you're very generous with your time. You're also generous in sharing the beliefs and mentorship of others. So thank you for that. And yes, we'll make sure that we share links below on how to get in touch with either of us in our communities. And blessings. Thank you so much. Really
yeah, big love.
appreciate you. I'm going
Yeah,
to go
big love to
now.
you.
Have a big day ahead. I finish, I think, at 9 o'clock tonight with our members. So we'll speak soon.
Yeah, big love, mate. Thanks for your time, and big love to all your members out there as well. It's
No
been a
worries.
pleasure.
Bye.